Welcome to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. I'm a couple of minutes late today for a change, but I hope you had a good week. Mine was tough, it was not easy, never is when you suffer from depression, and that's what the show is really all about. But what I try to do these days, which I found quite helpful, is to be kind to myself, look after myself. That's something I had to learn to do, because when you do suffer from depression, you tend to stop looking after yourself and caring about things. And it pays to be mindful, to be aware, to think of things, to ponder on things, especially on positive things. And I try to push away the bad thoughts, the negativity, and try and think of positive thoughts, little projects to do, little things, not too many. Don't overwhelm yourself with too much to do, but just set yourself one or two little tasks, little achievable goals that you can do that will make you feel better. And it's amazing how that can have a real snowball effect. I started doing that, and I decided that my house was just a bit of a tip, so I went crazy and cleaned the place. It took me 9 days, and boy, I was sore after that. But yeah, it looks fabulous now, and it made me so much more positive about my life, really, everything. It's nice to live in a very clean, neat environment. It's very pleasant. Right, well, time is a-ticking, so we better get on with today's story. Today's one is called Gallipoli and Istanbul. My good friend Wayne and I had hitchhiked our way around the Aegean coast from Greece to Turkey. We first headed down to the small town of Çanakkale, which is near the beach we refer to as Gallipoli. We met up with a guy called David, who ran his home as a hostel for travellers, especially Kiwis and Aussies. David was a fantastic host and arranged a cheap taxi over the hill to where the great battle for Çanakkale occurred. Wayne and I didn't know what to expect, so were amazed to find the place left pretty much unchanged from those terrible days when so many young men had perished. It was a small museum, temporarily manned by an old geezer, some well-tended graves at the top of the hill, and a large stone plaque from the term of President Ataturk. In the most respectful terms, it is written there for all to see. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country, therefore rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the mermaids to us where they lay side by side, here in this country of ours. You, the mothers, who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well. Ataturk, 1934. Apart from this plaque, the graves and museum, very little had changed from those terrible days when the abortive landings had taken place. Down on the beach, there were thousands of corroded shell casings and bullets lying everywhere. Many of these have been taken as souvenirs by tourists and are quickly disappearing as a result. Up from the beach was an area called the Pines, where many Australian boys had been slaughtered both by friendly fire and the fierce resistance the Turks had showed. At the time, a simple unsealed road led up to the hills of Çanakkale, where the Indians and Kiwis had been decimated. There were open trenches all over the place, undisturbed from the time those poor boys had fallen. The trenches were full of skulls, leg and arm bones protruding from the earth. As the land grew steeper, the number of bones increased and tears flowed freely as I touched them gently. Despite the incredibly steep and exposed terrain, the Kiwis managed to force the Turks off the tops, were forced back, then took it a second time, only to be hurled off a second time before a truce being declared. I did not believe in ghosts until that day, but the eerie emptiness of this open graveyard moved me as never before. After spending the best part of a day at Gallipoli, we headed back for tea at Kanakali, where through David I met up with one of the last Turkish survivors of the campaign. He heaped praise on his old enemies for their fierceness and tenacity, especially the Kiwis. He told me of the extreme hardships they all had to endure, freezing winter and blistering summer in trenches so close they could hear each other talking. It was quite overwhelming to hear of his hardships and humbling to hear of the great respect he held for his old enemy. After a very pleasant and moving stay at Kanakali, we headed back up the peninsula and eastwards on to Istanbul. This magnificent city on the Golden Horn is split in half by the Bosphorus Strait. On one side lies the new part of the city, with its high rises and western trappings like McDonald's. Fittingly enough, it is on the western bank and emphasises Turkey's wish to join the European Union. Right, we'll take a little bit of a break there and we'll play your song.
Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants the same thing. To see another birthday. Look at all the pretty numbers. Look at all the pretty numbers scattered on the calendars. I can see my reflection. I can see my reflection in the shop window. That space, declare it if you dare tonight. Let the moment pass till another day. Bright lights dissolve like sugar deep inside you now. The same somehow. I'm hardly here at all. Yeah. All the trash and the treasure. All the trash and the treasure. All the pain and the pleasure. Taste the edible flowers. Taste the edible flowers scattered in the salad days. Who wants that space? Declare it if you dare tonight. the moment pass until another day. Bright lights dissolve like sugar deep inside you now. Still the rain keeps coming down. I'm hardly hear it all. Everything's gone quiet now. I'm hardly hear it all.
Welcome back to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. Right, well, time's are ticking, so we better get on with the story. Gallipoli and Istanbul. The Eastern Bank, however, is the Byzantium and the Constantinople of old. It still retains some of the old Topkapi Palace walls from the Ottomans. Also the magnificent St. Sophia Byzantium period church. Erected at the height of the Byzantium period, it boasted the largest dome of any church for over 1,000 years. Below St. Sophia's, towards the banks, the dilapidated old buildings lean on each other like drunks. We stayed on the rooftop of one of these dodgy old places directly below the Blue Mosque, which sits in magnificence further up the hill. Excuse me. I walked up from our dodgy lodgings to St. Sophia's and spent a few hours in its pleasant cool on a blistering hot day. From there I walked up to a quadrant outside the incredible Blue Mosque. With its 6 gigantic minarets, its overall size is hard to take in. Entering the Blue Mosque, having first washed hands and feet in cool water and covering from wrist to ankle, is a religious experience in itself. The eye is drawn to the heavens by the untold thousands of beautiful handmade turquoise tiles, the bright light of God, their epicentre. It was impossible to take it all in with one glance. I found myself bowing my head naturally in order to take in the magnificence of this labour of love. The sheer scale only added to the potency of its message. The peace and serenity of this cool sanctuary was most welcome on a hot afternoon. Outside is a quadrant which houses one of the 4 Cleopatra's needles, taken from Egypt during the height of empire. The others are located on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, the embankment on the Thames in London, and at the Washington Monument in the United States. Strange how the symbols of old power are reused by the next great power. These so-called needles are obelisks of stone, tapering from bottom to top and finishing to a point at the top. Beautiful and huge in their own right, they are symbols of ancient power which are enhanced by their new surroundings, especially in Istanbul. At night there was a sound and light show outside the Blue Mosque which lit it up like a castle from ancient times. This spectacular show transported the crowd back in time to a time when great sultans ruled over this magnificent city and brought light and civilization into an otherwise dark world. The mighty Ottoman Empire slowly ground to a halt, finally collapsing at the hands of the invading Nazis during World War II. After the show, I headed back to our accommodation and got off to sleep with the help of the local hooch called Raki. First light, the morning calling to prayer broke out across the old city via speakers on the minarets of the mosques. Haunting and beautiful, it is an experience that stays with you for a lifetime. In the cool air and beautiful light of the morning, I walked up the hill to Topkapi Museum. Housed in the ruins of the old castle, it houses many priceless works of art and precious gems. Among these is the Topkapi diamond, a huge, beautiful stone which defies belief. Not as large as the Cullen diamond used in the British crown jewels, it nonetheless has an otherworldly clarity to it. It refracts the light so well it almost seems liquid. Also housed there are emeralds the size of dinner plates. Just a tiny fraction of the Sultan's treasures remain. Yet what remains is such a beautiful and impressive collection, it only sparks the imagination. There is also a collection of Ming Dynasty pottery so huge that the senses begin to blur on looking at it. Reminiscent of the tales of the Arabian Nights, I could easily imagine a great castle on the hill, full of great piles of treasure. By the very nature of the development of the city, it is impossible to rebuild what has fallen into disrepair. The ruins, however, only enhance the beauty and mystique of the old city. I left Topkapi Palace in the heat of the afternoon and headed down a street called Divinyol seeking shade. I came across a smoking cafe where the locals in their traditional loose clothes sat to while away a hot afternoon. The idea of this cafe was that you purchase a huge stub of tobacco for 100 or so lira. You are then waited upon by waiters who carry around hot coals on a plate. These are placed on the stub and put in a huge water pipe. The beautiful hookah pipes, as they are called, have a number of hoses and mouthpieces coming from them, so the experience can be shared amongst friends. They also serve hot sweet tea, called simply chai. It comes with no milk, instead they serve water with the tea. The cafe itself is an open courtyard, protected from the sun by high walls. The tables, chairs and floors are solid granite, and it is refreshingly cool. Old men sit around with friends, chatting and puffing on their pipes. As I watch them, I am transcended in time and imagine the same scene having played itself out for centuries. Even sitting on my own, smoking and watching was an extremely pleasant way to spend an afternoon. Despite the language barrier, I felt quite accepted. The combination of good tea and tobacco was quite intoxicating. I waited until the burning sun had stooped quite low before wandering down some narrow cobblestone streets. Old men sat on stools at short tables, drinking tea and playing backgammon. Since I had already played the game, I asked an old guy for a game. The language barrier can be overcome with hand signals and a few words. Before long I was being thrashed, but I stuck with it until I could hold my own at the breakneck speed. Backgammon is like a national pastime for men, and we played many enjoyable games, some of which I won. We played well into dark that night, and I felt like I had travelled in time, as this time-honoured tradition played itself out. With my first real lesson in backgammon, I headed back down the hill to my rooftop bed. It was only possible to sleep during the small hours. Over the next few days, Wayne and I moved to cheaper accommodation, which required a cheap bus ride just out from the old city centre. We visited other great mosques like Suleiman the Magnificent's around the Golden Horn. We also went to local markets with their exotic food and spices. The Turks are natural salesmen and always drive a hard bargain. Centuries of trading on the Silk Route seems to have honed their skills, making trading with them great fun. Despite obvious poverty, the city vibrantly bustles with trade. Handmade carpets are a favourite item with the Turks, and they go to great lengths to sell these works of art. Hot summer days of visiting mosques and markets, of smoking hookah pipes and nights of backgammon passed too quickly. Soon we were off south, down the coast, but the indelible impression of Istanbul stayed with us for the rest of our lives. The end. Well, boy, I've seen some really amazing, beautiful places, and it's very, very hard to pick a favourite, but Istanbul struck me as as being one of those most incredibly beautiful places, and although it does have some natural attributes, it is the buildings themselves, it is the mosques in the old city that really make it. And the Blue Mosque is, it'd have to be probably the most beautiful building I've ever seen, both inside and out. But fact that people have been there for thousands and thousands of years is just mind blowing. It's very hard to get your head around that. It takes a while for it to sink in and for you to realise just how amazing places like that are. And I was very lucky, I've been very privileged to travel in my life to quite a few places and see some amazing things and live in some incredible places. So, I like to think of those days before depression really got hold of me. And I mean, I pretty much suffered from depression all my life, but I mean, it's got better, it's got worse. But it shows you that you can achieve and you can do things. Even if you do suffer from depression, it doesn't have to stop you. You can still not only lead a productive life, but you can achieve great things. I mean, even people like Winston Churchill, arguably the greatest orator of the last century, he suffered very badly from depression, and he encouraged the nation in their darkest hour to be true to themselves, to hold on, to resist tyranny, and he must be applauded for that. He wasn't everybody's cup of tea. They dropped him pretty quick once the war was done, but it just shows you that people suffering from depression can achieve great things. Well, 5-2. Actually, that went a lot quicker than I thought it was going to. I am amazed. But 28 minutes is all we have. 1 minute to go, so I'm going to sign off. So thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I certainly enjoy doing it. I love it. And I'll be back with another great story next week. So if you know anyone suffering from depression or any other type of mental illness, be that difference maker. That's what I encourage you to do, because that's the way we change the world, one person at a time. And, you can do so much to help someone. Just a kind word is sometimes all it takes. All right, thanks, and we'll catch you again next week. Bye for now.